This is live from New Delhi. You're watching DT India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Sakal Bhatt, and coming up in the next hour, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to speak at the G7 outreach session, meets Pope Francis. Earlier in the day, Prime Minister Modi held talks with Ukrainian President Zelensky, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and French President Macron on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Italy. G7 leaders hail Ukraine deal and commit to faster transition from fossil fuels. G7 combine affirms action against unfair China business practices. Russian President Vladimir Putin sets out Russian conditions for peace talks with Ukraine, says Moscow will cease fire if Ukraine pulls troops from our regions. And South Africa's African National Congress reaches deal with opposition to form unity government. On day two, G7 leaders are holding talks in Italy's Puglia. The leaders are discussing immigration, which is a crucial issue for Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, who is pushing Europe to help her government curb illegal immigration from Africa. The annual summit will also see a historic appearance by Pope Francis, who will discuss the challenges posed by the artificial intelligence. And as the G7 summit nears its conclusion on Friday, leaders of the Group of Seven have agreed on multiple fronts, according to the expected draft statement. The G7 has vowed to take action against China's militarization and coercive activities in the South China Sea, along with unfair business practices. The draft also urges external actors to refrain from fueling the conflict in Sudan. The leaders are also added action towards mitigating climate change in the expected draft. The group has agreed to contribute 75% cut in the global methane emissions from fossil fuels by 2030 and also speed up transition away from fossil fuels. They also committed to upgrade national climate plans and said that countries should be added as contributors to the UN climate finance goals. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be taking part in the G7 outreach summit in Italy's Apulia on Friday, which is underway as we speak. Prime Minister Modi was joined by UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Pope Francis, among other top leadership of G7 group. Prime Minister Modi was greeted by his Italian counterpart Giorgia Meloni as Prime Minister Modi arrived to attend the 50th G7 summit. And to discuss how India's voice matters in the outreach session and otherwise also in the G7 combined, we are joined by Dr. Anshu Joshi, Professor, School of International Studies, JNU. Ma'am, thank you very much for joining us. As we speak, we believe that the outreach session is underway and Prime Minister Modi will be also addressing the session. And we understand that artificial intelligence, Indo-Pacific, Africa, among other things are going to be discussed. So put that in perspective, India's voice also matters in this edition of G7, which has seen an expanded guest list, and this being India's 11th consecutive G7 appearance.
Indeed, Sakal, India's voice matters not only at the stage of G7, but for that matter, at the by and large at the stage of global politics presently. And definitely, I'm really happy to see our Prime Minister participating in this annual summit of G7 in Italy. And as we can see the pictures, India enjoys its good and strengthened partnership with not only with Italy, but with the other member nations of G7, as in with France, or for that matter with Germany, with Japan, with the US, with the UK. Of course, we can see a tiff or some issues between India and Canada presently. But by and large, from the stage of G7, as the objective of G7 says, it is all about strengthening democratic values and finding out plausible solutions of various global issues ranging from climate change containment to maintaining global peace and security to like issues cropping up in Indo-Pacific to what is happening in Levant region between Israel and Hamas to the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. So the list is long, ranging from food security to artificial intelligence, but definitely I do see a great place and window of opportunity for India to put forward its philosophy and view to find out solutions of all these problems.
Do you think this is also serving as a timely opportunity to India to follow up on the major outcomes of the G20 summit held under India's presidency?
Definitely, which has been stated by Ministry of External Affairs also officially that it's a good opportunity to retrospect at the outcomes of G20 at this stage of G7, and definitely again I would come on the objectives that were picked up by G20. Ranging from climate change containment to technological advancements to food security to energy security to like moving from non-renewable sources of energy to renewable sources of energy, and that is why India proposed this biofuel alliance at the end of G20 apart from Delhi Declaration. And also it is about strengthening the relationship between developed and developing nations. So what India did as the president of G20 by like involving African Union into G20 officially, I see a lot of opportunity now at the level of G7 also, wherein developing nations could be like involved or could be invited to become the members of G7. As we can see that presently, apart from the regular member nations of G7, EU as an organization, European Union, is a enumerated member of G7. So this can be extended for other organizations also, and by doing so the stage could be opened for different views and organizations to come up with their solutions for all these issues at the global level.
Okay, how do you see India's regular participation only emphasizing on the increasing recognition of global challenges, particularly India seen as the leader of the global south, and that's the narrative that has gained a lot of traction in the last 1 year?
Definitely, as the president of G20, this is what India voiced for, and it became a vocal voice for developing global South nations. And India time and again reinstated its commitment for working as a bridge between developing nations of the North and these global South nations, so that cooperation can become a key for the future of global politics. Because at present, Sakal, we all see that how nations, just because of their small egos or because of past tussles, nations actually, conflict. We can see conflict with each other instead of cooperation, and this is what India is voicing for. As it talks about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, wherein it gives this message of considering entire earth as one family, and that was the statement for G20 as well. So from this stage of G7 also, I think Indian Prime Minister would definitely try to open the window of opportunities for global South nations as well, who have immense potential, from like having natural resources to skilled workforce, but they definitely need funding and the help of developed nations and also these intergovernmental organizations to grow further and to ensure their economic development.
Professor Joshi, one last question. How much does now G7 combined need India in the current context of conflicts that you also spoke about to expand its engagement with the emerging economies? Because this summit, we have seen how the doors have been opened to the other parts of the world, for example, Arab, and you've got Africa group there, all of that.
Sakal, at present, we are living in very interesting, times wherein we can see that how the world slowly is getting united despite having different conflicts in different nook and corners of the world. Yes, we should not forget that Russia-Ukraine war is still going on. We can also see that there is another theater of war in the Levant region wherein Israel and Hamas are, fighting with each other, and different other nations have also joined this particular conflict. On the other hand, we also see what is happening in Indo-Pacific region and for that matter, Indian Ocean region. But when we look at India, that is where entire world looks forward to India with great hope. Because you see bilaterally with all these member nations of G7 and for that matter the member nations of G20 also, or you consider other intergovernmental organizations also, today India enjoys special relationship, strengthened partnership with all these nations, and India is
Yes.
bilaterally working with all these nations into the
Yes.
strategized areas. So I see that India can work as a bridge.
Correct.
All these intergovernmental organizations to take the objectives further.
All right. Professor Joshi, I would request you to stay with us. Meanwhile, we are going to take a quick look at some other related developments in Italy G7 summit. Earlier, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and French President Emmanuel Macron discussed cooperation in several sectors as they met on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Italy. They also reviewed bilateral ties with a focus on the Indo-Pacific roadmap. Prime Minister Modi and Macron also agreed to expand strategic defense cooperation with an increased focus on Make in India. Taking to social media site X, Prime Minister Modi said, and I quote, "Had an excellent meeting with my friend President Emmanuel Macron. This is our fourth meeting in 1 year, indicating the priority we accord to strong India-French ties. Our talks covered numerous subjects such as defense, security, technology, artificial intelligence, blue economy and more. We also discussed how to encourage innovation and research among the youth. I conveyed my best wishes to him on the hosting of the Paris Olympics, which begins next month," unquote. Prime Minister Modi also met his British counterpart Rishi Sunak on the sidelines of G7. The duo discussed ways to enhance industrial cooperation in the defense sector. Taking to social media X, Prime Minister Modi said that during the meeting he reiterated his commitment to further strengthening the India-UK comprehensive strategic partnership in the third term of the NDA government. Prime Minister Modi also held talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines of the summit. Both leaders discussed ways to strengthen bilateral relations. They also exchanged views on the situation in Ukraine and the upcoming summit on peace being hosted by Switzerland. Taking to social media site X, Prime Minister Modi said, and I quote, "India is eager to further cement bilateral relations with Ukraine." Regarding the ongoing hostilities, reiterated that India believes in a human-centric approach and believes that the way to peace is through dialogue and diplomacy, unquote. Let's quickly go live across to DD India's Amritpal Singh joining us live from Italy, from the venue itself. Amrit, what is the latest that you are hearing? I believe the outreach session is underway and we're all waiting for Prime Minister's address. So what's going to be India's pitch?
Well, India in the outreach session will essentially talk about the voice of the global south, as India has come to represent that. There's an undeclared leadership, and India has given, as Dr. Joshi was saying, excellent relations with the G7 bloc as a bloc, but also individually with the leaders of the G7 countries. India stands poised to act as an effective bridge between the global south and the developed world. Underscoring to the developed world that unless the needs, aspirations, concerns of the global south are factored into the agenda of the West, because the West punches above its weight in global affairs because of its economic might, because of its geostrategic strategic heft, etc., political weight. In India's growing stature gives it a certain leverage with the developed world to listen to what the global South's needs are and how they need to be factored into the global governance architecture, and which needs to be more broad-based and inclusive. I think that would be the thrust of the Prime Minister's intervention. Of course, he could touch upon other issues like cross-border terrorism, artificial intelligence, using technology to change lives of people, and could put out that how India has effectively used all this to bring about development and the fruits of development to the people of India, and effectively contributed to removing global poverty.
Yes. Having said that, Amrit, also if you could just give us a sense on how India's voice or India's opinion really matters in such groupings. Of course, India is not part of G7, but this being India's 11th appearance and Prime Minister Modi's 5th. So in that sense, this is very significant, Amrit.
That's right. Given India's political heft, given India's growing stature, given India's the way India is looked at and the way India is heard in the global arena, on the global stage, it does give India a certain leverage, and that is why you see the West so eager to engage with India. Given the opportunities, given the Indian market, that is also a part of it. We can't deny that, given India's geostrategic location, because it suits their interests as well to collaborate with India and partner with India. So it's a mix of a practicality and a mix of your reflection of your growing stature in geopolitics or world politics. So that's why you see India being consecutively invited for the 11th time. And the Prime Minister Modi, because he's been in power for 10 years, so he being invited the 5th consecutive time as the Prime Minister of India. And also there would be a personality angle to it, because he does bring in a certain, he does infuse a certain charisma into and his personal relations with world leaders.
Yes, and yes, if you are there, I mean, if you could just take us through what you're seeing, feeling, believing, that moment when Prime Minister Meloni, she greeted our Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It was a very warm namaste moment. And of course, Prime Minister's very brief meeting, of course, with Pope Francis, his bilateral with Zelensky, where again, India has pitched for dialogue as the only solution.
That's right. The body language was warm with the world leaders that you mentioned. There was a certain amount of eagerness amongst the world leaders to engage with the Prime Minister, even at bilateral levels. You saw the bilateral meetings, and you saw the amount of bilateral meetings, the number of bilateral meetings that have taken so far. There are more scheduled. The German Chancellor is scheduled. We understand there are other partner countries that are scheduled. Fumio Kishida of Japan is scheduled to meet him after the outreach session. There are 7 bilateral meetings scheduled. So I think, on even while you have excellent relations with Russia, and Russia, which was earlier part of the erstwhile G8, is not invited here.
Yes.
And, the anti-Russia agenda dominates this particular summit. But India, while engaging with all sides, takes an independent position. And the world listens to it. I mean, you've been talking both to Zelensky and to Putin, and both sides hear you out, and you emerge as a voice of reason to them, saying it is in your interest, it's in the world's interest to return to the table.
Okay. If you could also have Professor Joshi on the screen. Meanwhile, Amrit, you spoke about Russia, and there is a reaction that has come from Russian ruling dispensation, calling it a sham and a futile exercise. They've dismissed it completely. But talking about how much G7 combined, Amrit, needs India to really expand its engagement with the emerging countries. That is also a very important aspect in this summit.
Yes, the G7 does need India for a couple of reasons. One, your growing stature, the way you come to represent the voice of the global South, assume an undeclared leadership on that. Second, because you're a voice of reason. You talk to both sides. You talk to every side, basically. Even in West Asia, you talk to the Palestinians. You talk to Israel. You've got excellent relations. You've learned that or mastered that fine art of walking the rope, the tightrope, and engaging with each other meaningfully. Even during this crisis, you were buying Russian oil, and you were telling the Americans that, look, we need to do that, and they did not break it there. They did not sanction you. They did not. They understood why you would need to do that. So it speaks about a certain heft that you carry. That is why the world is engaging with you. Your markets are another. Your growing economy is another. Your geographical presence, your geostrategic location is another. Indo-Pacific, you're right there. It's your extended neighborhood, Indian Ocean region. So all these factors contribute to why the West wants to engage with you meaningfully and wants to keep the door ajar with you.
Yes. Let's stay with Amrit and take this thought to Professor Joshi. Very interesting point, ma'am. Would you agree Amrit has made? Now, you have got US on the table. You've got Ukraine on the table. You're friendly. Your position with Russia or relationship with Russia is absolutely crystal clear, but you're siding with the peace. So the way India has navigated, and it will continue to do so, holding its ground.
Definitely, Sakal, and though Amritpal has wonderfully explained why all these nations need India at the moment, I'll add one more point to it. And it's about our skilled, dynamic, peace-loving diaspora that adds to the economy of all these nations, be it the United States of America or the UK, or for that matter, Japan, or for that matter, rest of the European countries. And that is where they actually want to collaborate with India. And at the moment, we can see the visuals how our Prime Minister had sideline talks with Zelensky on one hand. United States of America is there. On the other hand, what Amritpal beautifully explained, that this is all about being all aligned. So on one hand, wherein we have opened a new chapter of our partnership with the United States of America, we have not forgotten our beautiful relationship of years with Russia. And that is how we have made United States of America accept our position at the moment. And that's where the world looks forward to India. So when it comes to Israel-Hamas conflict, giving recognition of Palestine is in foreign policy of India. But India had the courage to condemn the brutal attack of Hamas over Israel during the wee hours on 7th of October last year. And that's where India has come up with a two-state solution, that we have to peacefully resolve this issue and end the war. That's the only way. In case of Russia-Ukraine war also, our Prime Minister very courageously and dynamically suggested Putin that this is not the time for war, this is not the era of war, this is the era for development. So you look at the stretcher of India at the moment, wherein we can openly discuss what we think, what is our philosophy with the rest of the world. And that's where the world actually wants to loop in India to find out solutions for, all these issues and to contribute positively to global politics.
Okay. Amrit, also would like to, get a sense from you the way this G7 has really thrown its doors open. There are many firsts associated with the historic one being the Pope there. He's going to be Pope Francis. He's going to talk about the, many would say, an alarm raised by artificial intelligence. So that sense, the Italian presidency of G7 has really added a lot in order to expand the ambit, the guest list, the expanse of the summit. So it's not elite anymore. The rest of the world is also part of it now.
It's not the first time, though, Sakal, that the outreach has been extended. That has been a part of a long-standing part. Every presidency has the prerogative of inviting who they want to invite. Mainly the countries invited are from Africa because that is next door to Italy.
But
that's
12 countries, 12 invitees, 12...
Absolutely, you're right. You're right, Sakal, that they've extended the ambit. Giorgia Meloni has extended the ambit, and carefully chosen whom she wants to invite.
That's right.
Every presidency sees where their interests lie. Africa is closer to her geographically, so she sees it there. It is, and also, given that it's a very confident Prime Minister Meloni after the Brothers of Italy parties win in the European Union elections.
Yeah, her own
And you can
constituency,
clearly
so
see
to speak. Yes.
within her country, in Europe as well. So this is a very, very confident Giorgia Meloni, and that reflects in her body language since yesterday as she engages with the world leaders.
Yes.
India, obviously, Italy values as an important partner. That's why you're the only country from India, a partner country from Asia being invited. The other, Japan, is an Asian country, but it's a part of G7. She's invited the South Americans as well. But yes, you're right that she's extended it to. But G7, that is also partly due to because G7 realizes that they cannot be an elitist grouping anymore. Otherwise, they'll be overtaken by groupings like the G20, which are broad-based, which are more inclusive, which are increasingly assertive, which matter more than just a small group of countries who may be punching way above their weight. Agreed, they control about 45% of the world's economy and still remain to date the most powerful countries. G7 remains the most powerful grouping in the world. But the contours of the world are changing. It's an evolving world. Countries which earlier did not matter much in the dynamic now are becoming increasingly assertive and asking for their rightful share under the sun. So that is why it reflects on G7 as well, that we cannot alone chart the course unless we take them along.
Yes, Professor Joshi, would you like to add to that? Like, you have leaders from Brazil, Middle East, India, Africa, the present. There's clearly a sort of shift, or in a way nod to the shift, because there is an acceptance of the changing global balance of power, where India figures absolutely prominently under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi.
That's what our External Affairs Minister also stated, last year, that this is not the time for all those colonial masters, like as in Europe. This is the time when countries from Asia and Latin America and Africa would definitely grow, and this is what we are observing, we are watching in front of us. And this change, this democratization of all these mighty platforms is really good to see, because then it opens a lot of scope. It leaves a lot of scope for development among all these nations. And I would give credit to India, not because I am in India, because this is what we have seen when India took up the presidency of G20, and India took up this, humongous task of democratization of G20. And that's what we have seen, how India successfully democratized the platform of G20. And this is what now we can, exactly the same change, transformation now we can see in G7. And I'm really happy to see that all these mighty, all these powerful economically, platforms comprising economically developed nations, superpowers, are changing in terms of, their nature, or like the member nations. So when all these representatives from different regions, from different class would come up together, there would be better solutions for the global issues, and at the same time there would be a better roadmap for the global politics, which is really complex in nature.
Okay, Amrit, would you like to add to that, and also the timing of the summit, and if you also had the time to have a look at the draft declaration, what's the sense you are getting? You have UK, US, they're looking at crucial polls, all of that. There is a sense of consensus on Ukraine, of course there is, but are there any thorny issues also, some difficult conversations, consensus on everything?
Sakal, I'll come to answer that question of yours, but I want to add to what Dr. Joshi very aptly said, that it is a very changing world, and they realize that the need for democratization. I think the Prime Minister in his outreach session will make this point very, very clearly. Tell the G7 that what you agreed at Delhi, at G20 in the New Delhi Declaration, you were very much a part of that. So go ahead and implement that expeditiously. because that is in your interest, that is in the interest of the world. There is a smaller prism that says the G7 on. You asked me about Ukraine, Russia. They looked at it from their prism of a military victory. There may be differences between the grouping, between members of the grouping on how much to help in terms of money, in terms of weaponry, what kind of weaponry, etc. But broadly, they are all on the same page when it comes to standing behind Ukraine. But the global South has a completely different perspective. It says that, look, it is your creation, you create it, then food instability, food insecurity happens, energy insecurity happens, that destabilizes our economies. The majority of the world's population lives, 2/3 of the world's population lives in the global South.
Correct.
So if they get destabilized, you cannot be insulated. So for your interests, own interests, please get back to the table and resolve it, because even if you keep fighting, finally to resolve it, one day you'll have to get back to the table. You got back to the table after World War I, you got back to the table after World War II, you got back to the table after Cold War. You've gotten back to the table. You have to get back to the table. Sooner the better, because it's affecting the more vulnerable parts. Earlier, it was their world, they decided how it runs. It's no longer the same story.
Yes.
The other part of the world is increasingly asserting its right, saying we've come of age.
Yes.
Thakor.
Yes, very aptly put. Amrit, before I leave you there, Amrit, any updates about when anything that you're hearing from the outreach session, and also what is expected in the evening itinerary of the Honorable Prime Minister?
The outreach session closes at about 9 p.m. Indian Standard Time. So there's still a little more time to go because various leaders speak in the outreach session. After that, the Prime Minister has 3 more engagements with the German Chancellor, with the Japanese Prime Minister, and 1 more engagement with bilateral engagements. And then the Prime Minister, there is a gala dinner hosted by Giorgia Meloni, the Italian presidency, and then late in the evening here, Italian time, and early hours of tomorrow morning, the Prime Minister takes the plane back to Delhi. Thakor?
All right. Amrit, as of now, thank you for joining us live from Italy, and many thanks, Professor Joshi. Such a pleasure talking to you, ma'am, as always. Thank you. Namaste. Thank you, Amrit. And still to come on DD India News Hour. Coming up next, this is what we have for you. The other top trending international stories: Conservatives pushed to 3rd position. 3rd spot in latest pre-poll survey in United Kingdom. And Indian Air Force's special aircraft with mortal remains of 45 victims carried to Kochi and Delhi.
पेमेंट फेल लेकिन पैसे तो कट गए। गई मेरी मेहनत की कमाई।
हो जाएगी भरपाई, चिंता मत कर मेरे भाई। अगर डिजिटल ट्रांजैक्शन फेल हो जाए और अकाउंट से पैसे कट जाएं, तो बैंक समय से पैसे लौटा देगा, वरना कॉम्पनसेशन का है प्रावधान। नहीं तो आरबीआई के ओम्बुड्समैन को शिकायत करें आप।
या बिल,
मेरी फीस। आरबीआई कहता है,
जानकार बनिए, सतर्क रहिए।
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Sakal Bhatt, and moving on to latest coming in from Russia. Russia's President Vladimir Putin on Friday has set out conditions for starting peace talks with Ukraine. And on the eve of a peace conference in Switzerland to which Russia has not been invited, Putin has said that Russia would be ready for ceasefire talks if Ukraine withdrew its troops from 4 Ukrainian regions claimed by Moscow, and if Ukraine gave up its plans to join NATO.
Withdrawn from the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions, and I draw your attention from the entire territory of these regions, within the administrative borders that existed at the time of their entry into Ukraine. As soon as Kiev declares that it is ready for such a decision and begins the actual withdrawal of troops from these regions, as well as officially notifies that they abandon plans to join NATO, an order to cease fire and begin negotiations will immediately follow from our side, literally at the same minute.
Meanwhile, a Ukrainian presidential aide dismissed the peace proposal put forward by President Vladimir Putin, saying it was not a serious attempt to agree on peace and had no relevance to any negotiations. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has called Putin's proposal an ultimate and that it could not be trusted. An ultimatum that could not be trusted. And Moscow, which has not been invited in the upcoming international conference in Ukraine, has called the gathering futile, the G7 gathering futile. That's what Russia calls it. The June 15 to 16 meeting in Switzerland is Kiev's perpetual attempt to reaffirm support against Russia. US Vice President Kamala Harris, French President Emmanuel Macron, and the leaders of the Germany, Italy, Britain, Canada, and Japan are among those set to attend. The Reform UK party has overtaken British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's Conservatives in an opinion poll. Ahead of Britain's 4th July polls, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has declared that his party was the opposition to Labour after an opinion poll showed it had overtaken the Conservatives for the first time. The survey, which involves 2,211 participants and was carried out on 12th and 13th June, revealed that Reform UK garnered 19% support, 2% increase from their previous standing, while the Conservatives remained unchanged at 18%.
What I will do, if you give me the honour of being your Member of Parliament, I will stand up and fight for people. I will stand up and fight for small businesses against the regulators. I will stand up and fight for people to get their rights. I will stand up and fight to make sure that schools are not poisoning the minds of your children.
Cyril Ramaphosa is set to be re-elected as South Africa's president as the Parliament convened on Friday. The Democratic Alliance said it had signed a deal for a unity government with the African National Congress. The two opposing parties will now come together to usher a new era in South African politics. Two smaller parties, Inkatha Freedom Party and the right-wing Patriotic Alliance, will also take part in the unity government. NATO defence ministers are meeting in Brussels for the second day, and the ministers of NATO member states had gathered on Thursday to discuss their support for Ukraine. Ukraine's defence minister Rustem Umerov in a statement has said that urgent needs for more supplies of weapons and ammunition for Ukraine will be discussed at the meeting.
We appreciate for your personal leadership, for the NATO partners for our urgent support, and I look forward to discuss with you long-term cooperation models. And I think it will be our last meeting before the Washington summit, which we look forward to have soon on the leadership level, and we will be, of course, touching all the urgent needs and long-term necessity in the institutional changes that is being proposed.
Let's take a look at other stories making news around the world. Cambodian authorities on Friday burned more than 4 tons of seized illegal drugs at a ceremony in the capital Phnom Penh. Most of the drugs were trafficked from the Golden Triangle area between northwestern Myanmar, northwestern Thailand and northern Laos. Protesters took to the streets in Brazil against a controversial anti-abortion legislation that puts abortion at par with homicide. The demand of the government to abandon the bill as it represses women's right to terminate their pregnancies in urgent situations. They believe that the bill, even though it is passed by the Chamber of Deputies, is undemocratic. Inmates of 16 prisons in Venezuela went on strike against poor living conditions and delayed trials. In the meantime, Julio Zerpa was appointed as the new penitentiary affairs head of the country. A year after an Egyptian migrant boat capsized in the Mediterranean Sea, there has been no clarity about the causes of the accident and the missing passengers. While various inquiries are underway, victims' families are hoping for a quick closure. And still to come on DD India News Hour, coming up next. $1 million aid received by Papua New Guinea from India for recent landslide devastation. Heatwave returns to North India even as the monsoon advances. And India's Divya Deshmukh wins World Junior Girls Chess Championship 2024. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Sakal Bhatt. Washington's top diplomat in Taiwan has warned on Friday that China's provocative actions around Taiwan, Japan and South China Sea could unintentionally spark a broader conflict. Speaking at a press conference, Sandra Quidrick, the outgoing director of the American Institute in Taiwan, has emphasized the position of the United States.
The United States is profoundly devoted to a status quo in the Straits and in the region, the broader region, that is one of peace and stability. And that is why we have consistently urged the PRC to avoid coercive or provocative actions.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump has returned to the country's legislature built to meet Republicans in his first visit since the riot happened there 3 years ago. Former President Trump met with Republican lawmakers to build unity ahead of the 5th November elections. Republicans hope to see Trump defeat Biden, extend their current razor-thin 218 to 213 majority in the House and take control of the Senate. The Democrats currently lead 51 to 49. U.S. President Joe Biden has reiterated on Thursday that he would not pardon his son Hunter Biden, who was convicted this week of lying about his drug use to buy a gun in 2018. Biden made the comments during a press conference alongside Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Italy. On June 11th, it may be recalled, a 12-member jury convicted Biden's son Hunter Biden of lying about his drug use to illegally buy a gun in 2018, making him the first child of the sitting U.S. president to be convicted of a crime. New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon and Chinese Premier Li Qiang have hailed bilateral ties and business connections on Friday. Earlier on Thursday, both the leaders met in Wellington and signed bilateral agreements on trade and climate during Li's trip, the highest-level Chinese official to visit New Zealand in 7 years. New Zealand Prime Minister said that the government was focused on creating opportunities for exporters. Tesla shareholders have voted to reinstate CEO Elon Musk's pay package worth up to $56 billion and it's going to be the largest pay deal in corporate US history, but was struck down by a judge in January, citing its size. Tony Waterman has more from outside the Tesla Gigafactory in Austin, where the vote took place, on what it could mean for India.
As you'd imagine, Elon Musk had a lot of pep in his step when he took the stage at the shareholders meeting held at the Gigafactory right here behind me. He told the crowd that he loved them, and he said that he could grow the company tenfold again, which is an amazing feat and part of the reason why he was eligible for this record-breaking payout. This vote was really a vindication for Musk, who has been battling in the courts to get his due. A judge in Delaware threw out the deal in January. She called it unfathomable, and she also raised concerns about the independence of Tesla's board, which struck the deal with Musk back in 2018. Now, even though shareholders have given their blessing, it does not mean that Musk will automatically get the Tesla shares owed to him. His legal team will first need to convince that very skeptical Delaware judge that nullified the deal to reinstate it. So it could be many, many more months before Musk can exercise the stock options in this deal, if at all. What the vote does do, though, is that it gives Musk a mandate, a permission slip to continue to lead the company the way he sees fit. And he has made it very clear that, at least in part, Tesla's future lies in India. He's been pushing aggressively to expand in the country as sales slump in China. And there have been reports that Tesla could, among other things, invest upwards of $3 billion in a new factory in India. Tony Waterman in Austin, Texas, reporting for DD India.
A special Indian Air Force flight carrying the mortal remains of the deceased in the fire tragedy in Kuwait has arrived at Palam Technical Airport in capital Delhi on Friday. The tragic fire incident claimed 49 workers 2 days ago. Several leaders were present at the airport to receive the mortal remains. Minister of State MEA Kirti Vardhan Singh said that Indian Embassy is currently constantly in touch with the injured and they are monitoring the situation.
माननीय प्रधानमंत्री के जो कोई डायरेक्शन थे हम लोगों को हमारे एक्सटर्नल अफेयर्स मिनिस्टर के द्वारा हम लोगों को मिला किए और हम लोग उसी के तहत काम किया किए और वहाँ पे जो हमारे एम्बेसी के लोग हैं हमारे आदरणीय एम्बेसडर साहब वो भी बहुत तेज़ी से इसमें लगे रहे और हम लोग सारे वहाँ के मिनिस्टर्स से मिले और उनका हमारे कुवैत की सरकार का बहुत बड़ा कोऑपरेशन इसमें रहा है.
An Indian Air Force special aircraft carrying the mortal remains of the 45 nationals who lost their lives in the tragic fire incident in Kuwait arrived in southern Indian city of Kochi earlier on Friday. The aircraft carrying mortal remains of deceased first landed in Kochi, as most of the victims are from Kerala, before proceeding to New Delhi for the victims from the northern states. India's Minister of State for Tourism Suresh Gopi and Kerala Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan were among those who were present at the airport. Among the victims, 23 were from Kerala, 7 from down south Tamil Nadu and 3 from southern state of Andhra Pradesh, 4 from Uttar Pradesh, 2 each from Bihar and Odisha and 1 each from Jharkhand, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Punjab and West Bengal. And now let's take a look at other stories making news. BSF troops recovered heroin on Amritsar border after an extensive search operation in the early hours of Friday. The drug packet was found in a farming field adjacent to village Hardoratan of Amritsar district. Government of UP or Uttar Pradesh is conducting an anti-encroachment operation in Lucknow's Akbar Nagar. The operation to clear the residential areas has entered its 5th day with around 500 house demolitions, 600 left to go. Operation may finish within next few days. Well, after a devastating landslide in Papua New Guinea's Enga province, relief assistance from India has reached the island nation on Friday. The $1 million aid was received by Papua New Guinea's officials, including their Foreign Minister Justin Kashenko and Defence Minister Billy Joseph. India's High Commissioner handed over the material to Foreign Minister Kashenko. He thanked his Indian counterpart Dr. S. Shankar for the timely help. Northern states in India are grappling with the longest and most severe heat wave according to data from the Indian Met Department. Delhi has been enduring extreme heat conditions for the 5th consecutive day. The Met Department has predicted no respite until June 19th. Heat waves will continue in many parts of Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Haryana, Chandigarh, Punjab, West Bengal, Bihar and Jharkhand. According to IMD data, India has witnessed its longest spell of heat wave days this summer. Well, India has released data for May trade figures on June 14th. India's total exports estimated to grow at 10.25% in May 2024. Cumulative overall exports during April-May 2024 is estimated to grow at 9.21%. According to the data, India's merchandise exports in May 2024 rose by 9.10% of the US dollars 38.13 billion from US dollars 34.95 billion in the year-ago month. Cumulative value of exports during April-May 2024 stands at 73.12 billion US dollars as compared to 69.57 billion US dollars during the April-May 2023. This registering a positive growth of 5.10%. Trade Secretary Sunil Bhartwal, while releasing the figures, said that things were optimistic for the trade sector. Adding further, he said that rise in exports in May was driven by growth in outbound shipments of pharmaceutical products, petroleum products, engineering goods, electronic goods and others. You're watching DD India News Hour. Time for some sports news. Well, Germany began their quest for the first major title in decades as the Euro 2024 hosts played their Group A opener against Scotland on Friday to kick off the tournament. Germany have won 4 World Cups, 3 European Championships, but have faced a series of failures since their 2014 World Cup victory in Brazil. They exited the last Euros in the round of 16. Germany will need to underline those big ambitions against the Scots, who are playing in back-to-back European Championships for the first time since 1996. Meanwhile, Scotland, clear underdogs, are hoping for an early upset that could help guide them through the group stage for the first time in 11 international tournaments. The United States of America will take on Ireland in the T20 World Cup match in Fort Lauderdale. That's the Dale City in Florida on Friday. They will hope to qualify for the Super 8 stage of the tournament. USA can join India with a win against the Irish. Pakistan, who are also in Group A, will be closely monitoring the game, and they would hope for an Irish win to stay in contention for Super 8. Weather forecasts hint at a strong possibility of rain, and even a washout would eliminate Pakistan from the competition. Pakistan has 2 points from 3 games, while US has 4 points from 3 games. And India's Divya Deshmukh has added another significant title to her already impressive collection by winning the World Junior Girls Chess Championship in 2024 on Thursday. The 18-year-old from Nagpur beat Bulgaria's Beloslava Kratseva in the final round at the Gift City Club in Chandigarh. Divya Deshmukh on your screens. The top-seeded Divya finished with 10 points out of possible 11 as she remained unbeaten, winning 9 games and drawing 2. Rafael Nadal has confirmed he will not take part in the Wimbledon 2024 Championship in order to prepare for the Paris 2024 Olympics starting in July. The 38-year-old is a record 14 times winner of the French Open. However, he has been far from his best after returning from injuries and is exited the tournament at Roland Garros. Nadal will team up with Carlos Alcaraz to play in the doubles at the Olympics. Well, that's all for this edition of DD India News Hour, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. With those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Sakal Bhatt, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.